these poll results tend to show that Australians really aren't that worried about climate change and they just want cheap, reliable electricity.
Well, they should have done a poll on whether or not people are interested in climate porn, I think.
I meant to say climate fear porn.
The results might be somewhat different. But, you know, people are starting to see the reality of all of it. And look, you know, I think most people in their heart of hearts have no particular problem with trying to decarbonise as long as it doesn't hurt them economically. And this is the point that Bjorn Lomborg has been making for a very long time. And remember when he tried to set up shop over in Western Australia and basically got hounded out of town because he said, look, I have no issue with going towards renewable energy. I have no issue with saying that climate change is real, but the transition has to be done in a way that does not hurt the people of the world. And that's where we are now. I mean, it's abundantly clear every time you open up your power bill that renewables are not the cheapest form of energy. We know that we're being corralled into buying electric vehicles, but people don't want to buy electric vehicles. Don't forget that the projections from the federal government when they were the opposition, before they got elected, was that by 2030, 89% of new car sales would be electric. Now, the Federal Transport Department says it will be 27%. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. They keep looking at the numbers. No one in the energy sector seriously believes that we're going to meet these net zero targets. Yeah. So when it's clear to the people who work in that sector and deal with it every day, it's become clear to the average Australian, you start to go, well, why am I paying all this extra money and going through all this extra hurt if I'm not going to benefit from it? I am losing out for something, for a goal that we know is not going to be achieved. And the other great point out of all of this was that there is still rising interest in nuclear energy.
40% of people.
Correct. There are more people who are interested in nuclear energy being part of the energy mix in this country than there are not. People are starting to wake up and go, nah, we've been sold a pup here and it's about time someone put a bullet in the green dream. And I know the green dream, you know, is a version of a bullet anyway when you're talking about animals, but you put a bullet in it and say, this is not going to work, it's time to move on. If it's cheap, great, I don't care. If it's cheap, I'm all on board. But it ain't, and people can see it.
And one thing I couldn't believe about this poll, though, was it showed, so it says, broad support for the Albanese's government Future Made in Australia Act. Have you read it? Do you have any idea what it's proposing? Let's just take a moment to appreciate that any bill, any act, anything brought together by government never has what it's really about in the title. In revolutionary France, the group responsible for marching over 15,000 people to the guillotine wasn't called the Cutting Off Their Heads Committee. It was called the Committee for Public Safety. Read what is in this thing before they're like, oh, broad support. Yeah, the title sounds brilliant, Australia. I agree. Wouldn't we all love a future made in Australia? But read the fine print. That's not what it's about at all. It just does my head in when we get these polls that say, oh, but this is brilliant, everyone thinks it's popular. Who among the just over 1,200 people polled knows a thing about the Future Made in Australia Act? And then the government goes, oh, we're on to a winner here. We can just slip this one right in, ride it all the way to the election. Everyone thinks it's gonna be brilliant. I head in hands, do not know how democracy is supposed to work when so few people going to the polls have a clue what they're really voting for.